The following program is the property of KCEG Radio and cannot be reproduced or rebroadcast without the permission of KCEG Radio. And now, coming to you live from Studio A in beautiful downtown North Dakota, ladies and gentlemen, for your listening pleasure, it's the Mike Leonard Show.
KCEG Radio, playing unsigned artists 24/7, and you are listening to the Mike Leonard Show. Now here's Mike with today's topic.
Well, thank you, girls. Tonight's topic is going to be 9 of them, so we're just going to start the show real quick. But tonight we have Dianne Meinke co-hosting tonight's show with special guest Stu Wright. Right now, we are waiting for David Weir to come on, but I want to thank you all for coming on tonight. The Mike Leonard Show, sponsored by Sarad, and we'll welcome Dianne. Are you ready to get started, Dianne?
Absolutely. We've got a lot of territory to cover tonight. Still waiting. It's Larry Weir. And she's out of L.A. that we're waiting. That's okay. No worries.
I don't know.
Call me anything. Not late for dinner. It's all good. Well, first thing I'd like to do first is thank you for having us on the show, Mike. I really appreciate it. I think it's all about, sharing what we know and helping each other out, right? That's the way I think about it anyway. I'd like to introduce Stu Wright, and I'm going to leave it up to you, Stu, to tell us a little about where you came from and what part of radio you worked in. I think we've got a really good trio of, plus a quad, level people here. We've got an artist, we've got a radio guy, we've got 2 radio guys, and we may have, hopefully, a radio promoter. Not quite with us yet. But, Stu, would you do us the honor of telling us a little bit about your resume?
Well, thanks, first of all, for having me on. Yeah, for the past 10 years, I was kind of program director and morning guy at 100.3 WORG in Orangeburg, South Carolina. And I've been in the business for like 46 years since I started in high school back in the 60s, so I'll get to that in just a couple of seconds.
Oh,
but
Larry?
The station was sold to, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, we got another caller. Stu. You're Stu.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry.
We
got another caller. I'm not sure if that's Larry or not.
That would be Larry.
Okay, good. We got Larry.
That sounds like Larry.
Okay.
Right,
sorry to interrupt.
Right.
I just wanted
Welcome,
to
Larry. It's okay. Larry, we're just doing intros, resumes.
But anyway, my radio station that I was working at last was sold to the Education Media Foundation. They do not use people. They do an all-Christian format with basically a satellite receiver at the transmitter, and they don't need anybody. So I'm out of work right now, basically. And the only time I've listened to my station since it's been sold was a couple of weeks ago, and I heard begging for money. My experience, excuse me, covers many different genres of music, from country to top 40 to adult contemporary to old to the big band stuff of the music of your life, and been in the business for a long time. Like I said, since about 1968, took a break a couple times to be an over-the-road trucker, but radio is my love, and that's what I've been doing. And I think I know a little bit about the business, and I've never seen it like it is now.
Is it good or bad?
Well, I'm glad you said that. Yeah, well, good or bad? They have the companies like iHeartMedia and Cumulus have snapped up so many radio stations, and the new rulings for the FCC are going to make it where a station does not even have physical presence in its community of license or city of license. And I'm going back and there are very few mom and pop radio stations left. There are a few. But, in the old days, if you lost a job, and I'll probably go back to the old days several times during this thing tonight. But the old days, small, little market station. If you had a license, and you had to have a license to be on the air, those in the old days, so to speak. You lost your job at one station, the station next time have something for you if you had a license. I mean, you may wind up doing Sunday afternoons.
But eventually something would open up, 20 miles, 30 miles down the road in the next town. But that just doesn't happen anymore. And so it makes it very challenging to look for a job. It also makes it challenging for, let's say, and I'm not saying this in a negative way, but new artists or unsigned artists to major labels to have a chance to get played. They used to get played. Smaller stations used to be used to help break new artists, and that just doesn't happen anymore. And that's kind of sad.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a different market now, isn't it, Stu?
Very much a different market, and
very much different.
When two companies go into a market and they own almost all the stations, it makes it really hard to compete, or it makes it hard to get music played, and it makes it hard to get a job.
Yeah,
well,
totally a different landscape up there.
Stu, I have to say this. I've had a lot of radio stations out in this state here that wanted me in for country, and I just couldn't handle country all day. So, I've turned down jobs out here, but, I don't mind, I don't mind the oldies or top 40s or something else, but country, I'd be sleeping more than I'd be talking or up.
Well, I'm doing some part-time sales for what used to be the competition across town, and I've done a little bit of on-the-air production work for them. But again, they just don't want to hire somebody full-time like to do after. It's country, but country, as we know today, much of today's country is not country, at least in my book.
No.
I've played country before. I don't mind it at all. So it's, but again, today it's just very tough to find a job, and you got to find something else. Probably I'm going to have to find something else to do. So that's that.
Hey, Stu, we got a question for you.
Sure.
If you were to pick out, 3 artists that stick out in your mind, major label, over the years that you promoted that was, you were a part of on the radio, whether it's spinning or whatever, that stick out in your mind, who would those 3 be?
You mean 3 artists maybe that I helped break, or just 3 that I always played? Or, yeah. Well, one thing I did was, the promoter who helped me do this is, and a local record promoter is another thing that's long gone basically these days from RCA Records, helped me get on Alabama, and I was the first non-country station to play an Alabama hit. I think that was Love in the First Degree, if I'm not mistaken. And I've always liked to play, so that was quite an honor. That's the one that sticks out most in my mind. I do have a couple of gold records. One of them for Simply Red, Holding Back the Years, and another one for Anita Baker's stuff. So, or platinum album.
Very cool.
Yes.
So those are some of the people I've helped, I guess, along the way through the years, and some others. And I can't think of off the top of my bald head right now, but
Hey, would you mind if we just jump for a second? I'd kind of like to get Larry in the mix here and introduce him. Larry, thanks for joining us tonight. And I'd kind of like to have you tell us a little bit about, I know your history is vast. So I know you're doing my radio promoting and doing a bang-up job.
Well, thank you.
Tell us a little bit about yourself, Larry.
Well, I'm a longtime veteran. Started out actually as a manager, record producer in the 80s. Had my little brother Michael Damien, who was my #1 project, and worked his stuff as far as trying to get deals, and ended up getting him signed to CBS Records in Canada. Put out a couple albums there, and then had a little bit of luck in the late 80s. We got involved with Cypress Records, which was distributed by A&M Records, the A&M Records family, and ended up doing a few albums there, and had a #1 single in 1989, the remake of the David Essex Rock On, which, in 12 magical weeks climbed the national charts to be #1 on Billboard, Radio and Records, and just about every chart in America. It was an amazing experience going through that, being that A&M Records had quite a field staff, and so we would travel different parts of the country, meet with the radio reps, and then go around and visit the radio stations. And, through those experiences, I realized once we were off A&M years later that I actually knew more of these radio stations and radio programmers than most of the other independents that were asking me to give them thousands of dollars to promote, Michael when we were on smaller labels. So I had a very good training experience working with the A&M Records family. A little break there, and then ended up just starting my own independent record promotion company when people said, hey, I understand that you are going out on your own, and word of mouth kind of spread and ended up as a full-time gig ever since, so kind of where I started. And I spend, 5 days a week calling radio, talking to stations, talking to program directors, and working with great artists like Dianne Meinke, and it's quite a fun thing. I really enjoy what I do.
That's a great thing to be able to say, Larry. And also your family was very deep into the music. You had a band was it the Weirs?
Yeah, in the early days we had I have 6 sisters and I have 2 brothers. We're all musicians, and at one time we had a band that toured all over the USA called the Weirs. It's pretty cool. Ended up headlining 3 nights at the world-famous Troubadour in Hollywood, and it was just a great experience. I mean, nothing like doing the grind of playing the 5 hours a night kind of situation, throwing in the originals with the covers, as most musicians end up having to do, but fantastic experience, grueling, traveling around in a van together, having to deal with 6 crazy sisters, and but that was part of the story,
Wow. That's a little too much, huh?
Yeah, a little bit too much.
I bet. I could only imagine. Oh my. I don't know if you had any questions, Mike, but I'd kind of like to dive into the agenda. I mean, what we want to talk about is radio then and now. I mean, obviously, Stu, you've touched on things have changed. What about you, Larry?
Well, I'd say one of the interesting things that I've noticed just from when I started is that with the insurgence of the rap music and a lot of the R&B stuff that's crossed over, there's been a springboard of indie labels. So in the early part of my promotion, I had to deal with a lot of programmers and music directors grilling me about what label the artist is on and who the support system is, and I'd have to do a lot of tap dancing, because a lot of these were independent artists without a big label. And, over the course of the years, that discussion is pretty much out the window because so many people have gone independent and so many artists have left labels to just be independent. I mean, when you have a group like the Eagles just deciding, hey, we don't need a label, we'll just put it out on our own because we're still going to sell a bunch. Or you have a lot of country artists deciding to, leave the roster and do their own thing, or pop artists just putting stuff out independently. I think it's created a much better climate with respect to the indie artist or the small label. I think the programmers I talk to now don't grill me about what label or what support system or how the retail is going to be, because there's no retail anymore. But now it's really more about the music, and I think that does move into much more of a favorable landscape for the independent artist or band, at least from my perspective.
Say, do you guys?
It's really good. It's a really good positive thing.
Do you guys want to?
What's that?
Do you guys want to take questions or anything from listeners or?
Why not?
Oh, I'd be glad to if I could possibly answer them. I will go back to one thing too. Now this goes way back. I got into radio because I guess the battle of some AM stations down the coast from here. I grew up in Beaufort, South Carolina, which is on the coast, and salt water helps, if you will, for lack of a better term, AM radio signals. So we could get a lot of stations, and I was influenced by a bunch of radio stations. I worked at a little station, WSID in Beaufort, South Carolina, which is still on the air under different call letters and a different format, but it was basically top 40. But we did some of that hometown local stuff, and I never will forget the Stork Report, and then listened to a couple of AMs out of Jacksonville, Florida, the Big 8 and WPDQ, and then the station out of Savannah, where I later worked, WSGA and WTMA out of Charleston. And all those stations at those times had their own little personality. Yeah, they were basically top 40, but there was a little fluctuation in the playlist, if you will, and definitely a fluctuation in the way the personalities were on the air. And that was kind of the magic of radio. And to me, with the big corporations owning so many stations and they sounding just alike, it's not quite the same. And I guess things just don't stay the same. But, you would look forward to traveling maybe to Atlanta and hearing how the stations there sounding, what they were doing. Or maybe traveling to Asheville, North Carolina and hearing what those stations are doing. And maybe stealing some ideas. That just doesn't happen anymore. And kind of miss those days.
Speaking of Beaufort, South Carolina, that's right near Parris Island, South Carolina.
That is the home of Parris Island. That's right. As a matter of fact, Parris Island is across the water from the house I grew up in from 1968 to 1972.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's where I went to base.
Don't you guys have that? Don't you guys have that beach music scene going on over there too? I hear a lot about.
Yeah, we do. Southeastern beach music. As a matter of fact, Sirius XM has this. Yeah, Sirius XM even has a beach music channel for the summer. But yeah, we have that beach music channel. Beach music. Let me see. There's Drifters, the Tams, a lot of the Motown stuff. If you can shag to it. I'm a Girl Watcher by the Occasions is a beach music classic. Those kind of things. Yeah, we do have that beach music thing still going strong. Yeah, yes, it is.
You're listening to KCG Radio. Go ahead. If you guys, one of the listeners want to call in and ask them any questions, feel free to call 646-668-2389. Go ahead.
What I was going to say was I wanted to touch on a little bit, Stu, because I know I worked radio too, is the strict format of the way it was, because it's so much different on internet radio now. So I was wondering if you could just touch on that, the things that you had to do.
Were you talking to me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay, well, a strict format. Let's go back again a few years. It used to be where you had several boxes of records, your records, and you had your A, B, C, and C rotations. A were the hottest, B's were kind of the up-and-coming songs, and C's were the brand-new stuff. And then you had a couple of boxes of oldies or songs that had just come off the chart. And your format was play from the front and put in the back. You play from one of the first 2 songs in the front, put it in the back. Let it rotate back up. That was the format in those days. And now it's pretty much strictly computerized. And a lot of places say you better not vary from that format one bit. You better not insert a request. You better not insert this song, whatever. You play what's in front of you.
And it's down to the second, right? I mean, when I did radio, everything was timed out, including the commercials.
More or less to the second. I mean, you do have some time to, talk, or you have some time. If you're running out of time at the top of the hour, you bump a song, because usually what they do is, so let's pick an hour and you have 10 minutes of commercials and 50 minutes of music. Well, you don't have quite that because you got to talk some. So they overprogram it. You get close to the top of the hour and you may bump a song, or the system will automatically bump a song.
Because what I was getting to, Stu, is the bottom line. The way the radios made the money was from the advertisers. It wasn't the music, right?
Right.
Because payola was outlawed. Well, sort of. We always find ways around things.
Always. Well, just remember, no legal till you get caught. But anyway.
Well, you know what? On that note, would you mind if, Larry, I ask you a little bit? I know you don't want to give away your secrets, right? But how you get a song, basically, and what you have to go through to get it played, like one of mine, on mainstream radio.
Well, you know, it's interesting. I mean, I still seem to go through the same grill. Of course, you know, not all music directors are as friendly as Stu Wright. You know, some of these guys are pretty tough, and you know, I'll go through this little song and dance with a music director. A lot of these guys, as Stu will attest to, a music director or a program director, especially in these small, medium market stations, music programming is just one item on their list of chores and duties. You know, most music and programmers allocate what they call call times, a convenient time for them to take calls from record company promoters. Most of them will allocate maybe an hour or two, if that, on a Monday or early Tuesday, or some of them take calls on Thursdays and Fridays. And in many cases, and I go through the same thing of, you know, they'll listen to a track for about 45 seconds and say, this is us, or this ain't us. Or they'll listen to something and go, well, you know, let me know how it does this week. And so my job as a promoter is to get some activity, get some chart numbers, and, you know, keep calling the same guys over and over each week with an update, try to entice the ones that weren't interested in the song the first or second week, maybe get them on the third or fourth week. And then also one of the most important things, and Dianne, you know about this, is a thing called maintenance. It's one thing to get a commitment from a station to put it on in a light rotation, but then what happens after that? You got to really make sure that they, number one, don't drop it. Number two, they help you increase it when you need it, which gives you the ability to move up charts. And, you know, you stay with them and you stay in touch with that programmer each and every week to make sure that he knows you're serious about staying on a particular record. That's kind of the general overview of what I do.
Yeah, we can go back some ways on some things again, and now, of course, as somebody brought up that you know, music sales these days are just not what they used to be, because you can get any song you want off the internet anytime, or you can YouTube any song that basically you ever want to hear. But one of the ways that, and it wasn't that long ago that, well, I'll go back to partly the days of LPs. Stations used to be enticed, let's say, to play a certain song if they would send 25 albums to give away on the air, or some CDs later on to give away on the air. And again, now I guess you can still do that, but many people just not interested in CDs. But that used to be a great way to promote an artist and to promote your song. How about give your listeners some CDs to listen to?
Well, you know, it's funny you mentioned this, Stu, because I get these calls all the time from programmers that say, look, I know a lot of your artists don't bother doing CDs, but we have an event coming up Saturday, and, you know, these guys are always looking for giveaways. They do, as you know, in radio, many of these programmers do station remotes. I mean, I'll try to take care of a lot of these guys and keep them happy. If the artist doesn't have a CD, they might have some giveaways. They might have some promotional items that they've made, or little trinkets that have their name on it. And I still get lots of requests for items that stations, and especially these smaller stations, can use as giveaways for their events. Get calls like that and emails all the time for that kind of stuff.
And that helps promote the artist too. So that is, you know, a good thing.
Well, yeah, I mean, I tell people, some of the artists, they will how come I'm giving you 50 CDs? I said, look, every time a station, you know, if you've given away something on the air and you can only give away 1 or 2 or 5, there are still a lot of other people that may not have had a chance to be the 5th caller on the request line or whatever, and some of them will hear about it, and they'll go investigate it and end up buying it on iTunes. So there's a lot of advantages to having some initial product available.
Well, you know, that kind of leads me to a question. And actually a comment about, you know, how important is radio still, Larry, in the market, and Stu, as far as for an artist? Because even though we've changed, the landscape's changed, I mean, to me, everything I've seen, that radio is still important.
Well, 82% of people still use radio, or of adults anyway, still use radio every week or every month. It's still a very high percentage. Part of the, I guess, the equation is now, 90 use radio on a weekly basis, but the pie is cut a little bit thinner. You know, it's kind of like where you go into a market, you have 6 radio stations. Okay, the pie is cut 6 ways. Well, now we share listeners with YouTube, we share listeners with, I don't know, iTunes, whatever. I mean, you can get a song a number of ways. So radio is still a very big influence, and you really have to have radio to make, I think, make a song, although I guess I'll probably be proven wrong on this, but to become the true mass appeal, radio is still the vehicle to do that.
What about
I
you,
agree, Stu. I think it's very important, and I think also another thing that I try to tell artists that are putting out an album, and I help them pick a single, and I'm sure you'll agree with this as well, is to add a little bit more a balance and volume to your program. It always helps to have a track that can move from adult contemporary to top 40. In many cases, you see all these country artists realizing, hey, I need to get into the top 40 game. And so, you know, you'll see these artists, Taylor Swift is a perfect example of making that crossover. You know, if you can go from 200 country stations and then add AC, hot AC, and top 40,